What's up, everybody?
Not another
We're in Louisville, Kentucky, day 360 of continued protest. Some of the new marches and causes that have popped up recently have been Free Palestine. So this is a march for Palestine happening in Louisville, Kentucky. A couple hundred people at least. 250 maybe. It's pretty hot. It's like 90 degrees today, but beautiful, beautiful weather. Organizers of this march know what they're doing. There's several individuals on bicycles helping block and divert traffic. There's medics with water and supplies. I believe they even got permits. I don't know that for a fact, but I assume they did because LMPD traffic control was down there blocking off part of the street for us. So maybe they got permits. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, hasn't been a lot going on in Louisville lately, building up for the 1-year anniversary of protest on the 28th. So I haven't had much opportunity to go live. It's Louisville, Kentucky. My normal streaming phone I left out in the sun before the march started, so it overheated. As soon as we started a march, it shut down. So I had to get out my backup phone.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Occupation is a crime! Israel out of Palestine! Israel out of Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Occupation is a crime! Israel out of Palestine! Israel out of Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Occupation is a crime! Israel out of Palestine! Israel out of Palestine!
Tommy Connolly, why exactly do you feel like we need to keep giving money to Israel? Would you like to back up your statement, sir? Well, Tommy, I'm a firm believer that killing anyone in the name of God is wrong. I don't think that's what God would like. I don't even personally know that I believe that God exists, but if he does, I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't want us killing people. Dumping money into Israel from the United States funds is creating more death, so I don't think God would support it. That's just my personal opinion, though. There's been atrocities committed on both sides, Palestinians and Israelites. There's been atrocities committed on both sides for thousands of years. It's time to get past those atrocities, work towards peace. Us dumping money into Israel is not working towards peace. It is creating more infighting within the region.
Occupation is a crime. Israel out of Palestine. Israel out of Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Long live Palestine. Long live Palestine. Save, save, shift the rock. 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 Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine.
God's wrath. I don't think God has wrath. Is God all forgiving or does God have wrath? Pick one. You can't have both sides. If you go by Christian or Catholic belief, the old God had wrath and vengeance. New Testament God doesn't. He's all forgiving. It's all fairy tales to me. Jesus can come anytime he wants, because if he does exist, if any deity exists, I've lived my life well enough that I'm not afraid.
Palestine is our right. We will stand. We will fight. Palestine is our right. We will stand. We will fight. Palestine is our right. We will stand. We will fight. Palestine is our right. Occupation is a crime. Occupation is a crime. Occupation is a crime. Israel out of Palestine. Occupation is a crime.
Tommy, you can keep spouting off about God all you want, but it doesn't matter. If Jesus was to come back right now, we'd probably crucify him again. Because he'd be standing with these people marching. He'd be standing with BLM protesters. Because Jesus, if you read about him in any capacity, you know that he was all about taking care of the poor, the unwanted, prostitutes, things like that. He was probably a communist, if we're going to be honest. Beth, I think you're right. Whenever that gets back up to God, he's going to be like, damn it, I thought I told Tommy.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free
I don't believe Palestinians as a whole are terrorists. I don't believe that Israelites as a whole are terrorists. I don't believe that any group of Middle Easterns in any capacity, any group of Africans, any group of Americans, any demographic, any race, I don't think any of those are terrorists innately as a people. No group of people are terrorists as a whole. There are terrorist organizations within all groups, even within white people. Think about the KKK. That is absolutely a terrorist organization, even though it hasn't been labeled one by the United States government. But that's an all-white terrorist organization. There are terrorist organizations within all demographic of people. Only reason there are terrorist organizations within all demographics of people is because people feel unseen, unheard. So they have to take things to an extreme to be seen and heard. It's the only reason terrorism exists. Yeah, let's all give up a collective prayer for Tommy real quick. He needs it. We are live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We prefer that you be watching on Twitch or YouTube. Facebook has been threatening to take down our page since January 6th, since the storming of the Capitol. So if you can watch on Twitch or YouTube, look it up, Right Heart Media, all one word, any platform. If you can follow on those two, that'd be great. We just launched a support system on Facebook, $4.99. You can become a supporter, get a custom badge and some exclusive content. You can go to rightheart.com. You can make donations to the Kentucky nonprofit, the Right Heart Inc. That is the mother organization to Right Heart Media. Those contributions will keep us able to come out and cover events such as these, and B, will eventually turn it into pools of funds that will become grants that will go back to the community. So again, rightheart.com, you can make donations, you can make monthly donations, weekly donations, daily donations, you can make a one-time donation. We also have t-shirts that are currently available. And we have our nonprofit, our first official nonprofit fundraiser happening June 6th at the Mammoth. It's going to be live music, a few other nonprofits that are going to be there explaining, their deal and everything. It is a fundraising event. We are trying to drum up potential donors. So if you do come, please come with money, ready to donate to one of the charities. Doesn't even have to be ours. But that's enough about Right Heart. Back to the march. Melanie Myers Lucas is a terrorist. Look, I can say nonsense things too. So, LMPD actually was initially blocking the road where we were gathering over by Waterfront Park. So the organizers may have gotten permits, I don't know, but LMPD and traffic control were out helping block traffic while we gathered. But no, they haven't been following since we started marching, so that's interesting. So going from Waterfront Park, we're now on our way to maybe Injustice Square. Looks like, potentially. Oh, maybe not the square. Looks like we got speeches going on Metro Council steps.
If we wanted to hold the banner.
What are you doing? What are you talking
Everybody get off the street, please. And come to the right of the stairs. Off the street, please. Everybody, please come to this side.
Yup. It's that kind of day.
It is, man.
Everybody come to this side, please.
Pay the cost to be the boss.
Everybody off the street. Free, free Palestine. 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 From the river to the
What up,
sea.
Ebony? Many blessings to you too.
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
We are kindly request the speakers to come forward. And again, like everybody, please get off the street and come to both sides of the stairs.
Only people only side, huh?
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
I don't like doing. I ain't with the infiltration shit. So you know me, I walk straight up to her ass, ask who she is. But I ain't, I don't want to be viewed in the wrong way. You know, I'm all about networking and community and shit. And I'm just trying to figure out where the fuck they been all year.
Can I get Attica
You know
Scott
what I'm
to
on.
come to the front, please?
Did you say Attica Scott?
What?
All right, Auntie.
Yeah. Well, she came out and spoke at the rally last week too.
Palestinians had a march for freedom.
Dope man out here. Oh my God, there go my peoples.
Attica Scott?
They were the ones sending messages to Ferguson about how to deal with tear gas and rubber bullets.
Right. I have people asking like, weird how the cops aren't harassing this march.
Well, I suspect they might have asked for a permit.
That's what I was thinking. This traffic control.
Also, too many people at risk.
Sure.
We don't have, it's just different risks.
Yes.
That was weird.
A couple of illegal grills.
Good.
Hello, everyone.
We're in a good spot, aren't we?
As long as live you jackass doesn't get in the way.
Hello? Yeah, let's do a couple of free Palestines. Who's gonna start? Hello? Hello? Okay, so how's the voice? Good, louder? Good? Okay, thank you guys so much for coming. A few notes. I know everyone's really hot, but if we could kind of just center ourselves a little more this way, so that, when I see the audience, it's a beautiful little half circle. People on the road, there's space on this side. And there's also water on the left.
I'm gonna shoot back here, man. Are you okay right here? 'Cause I just hit spot.
I'm sorry. My bad. My bad. I try to get as low as I can anyway, so.
Okay. So let's get started. First of all, free Palestine! Free Palestine! Okay, thank you guys so much. So, we all know why we're here today. We're here for a march for Palestine done by the Louisville Students for Justice in Palestine. Over the past few months, we've borne witness to multiple parallel and intersecting acts of violence committed by the Israeli occupation apartheid regime against the Palestinian people. This is not a conflict. In fact, there can be no equality or equal parity between an occupying state given billions of dollars of international military aid and the only nuclear power in the Middle East, and an occupied peoples with no formal military army or true government. Palestinians across the occupied territory deal with systematic human rights violations. We'll be having a series of speakers, Palestinian speakers and allies who've come out to speak a little on Palestinian condition and the struggles of the Palestinian people, as well as what it means to show solidarity with our demands and struggles. We should note that we're having this Louisville, Kentucky, the city of Muhammad Ali, whose dedication to the civil and human rights of Black people in America and the rights of oppressed people globally were not limited to empty words or empty actions. His refusal to serve in the Vietnam War sacrificed much of his career, and yet it is his moral clarity and internationalist solidarity that we all aim to emulate. Indeed, in his 1974 visit to a Palestinian refugee camp, he declared his support for the Palestinian struggle to liberate their homeland. We should also recognize that Louisville is the city of Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old Black woman killed by the Louisville Metro Police Department. The structural racism and police brutality we protest in Louisville, the mandate that Black Lives Matter, is intricately connected to the struggles of Palestinians. In fact, American police departments actively train with the Israeli Defense Forces, as outlined in a 2016 report by Amnesty International. Palestinian liberation is intertwined with Black liberation and the liberation of all oppressed peoples worldwide. So, we'll get started with the speakers. First of all, we'll be having Dr. Saeed Abu Salim, an associate professor at the UofL School of Nursing, who was born and raised in Gaza.
Free Palestine! Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I come from Gaza. I was born and raised in Gaza. Growing under occupation is not fun. It was hard for us to go to school. We were scared going to school. Our backpacks were thrown on the ground. We have to pick them up. We had to stand up on the walls and raise our hands. Many days, my mom and my dad said, do not go to school. And I choose to go to school. It was not easy. It was very tough. I saw my friends and my colleagues beaten up. I saw the rubber bullets. It's a metal ball with rubber around it. They're supposed to shoot it at you from far away. What they do? They shoot it at you from very close distance. They shoot it in people's eyes. And in one time, they shot it in one guy's heart and it went inside. Occupation is not fun. Occupation is not acceptable. And life under occupation is a life of fear. I came to the USA 5 years after I came here. Every time the winds blow, I imagine soldiers climbing up the house for me. I was scared after leaving Gaza for 5 years of them coming and scaring our life. And what happened in the last weeks? We watched on the last 5 days of Ramadan, our people, the worshippers in the Al-Aqsa, we watched them on TVs. The worshipper goes in and they're turmoil, torture, gas sprayed on him, gas cancer, sound blasting, and how they shoot the gas, how they shoot the tear gas and the sound cancers up the heads toward the eyes. Lots of worshippers lost their vision and lost their eyes through the last 5 holy days for the Muslims to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one of the most sacred houses of Allah on earth, Al-Aqsa Mosque. They torture them coming in. They torture them coming out. We watched and watched the 25th day of Ramadan, 26th day of Ramadan. Nobody in the world saw them. We saw them. We watched them because they're our people, because that's what we are. They would not let them pray. They let them go in, fire the tear gas. They beaten up the worshipper as they worship. It's very sacred when you stand toward your Lord to stand up and be praying in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And things escalated. And a war on Gaza was coming again. It's not the last one, and it's not the first war on Gaza. Gaza Strip, one of the most overpopulated areas in the world. When I went back, I tried to find a piece of land in Gaza to buy. There is no land in Gaza to buy. There is no land. People are on top of each other. Apartment on top of apartments. Look inside the house. Every room inside the house has a family. It's a demographic crisis in Gaza. A total demographic crisis in Gaza. 14 years of blockade. 14 years. There is no enough concrete. There is no enough medical supplies in the hospitals. And on top of that, here there are more bombardments and more shelling. And they talk to the world as civil. Trust me, there is lots of houses that were shut down and the people, kids died. 248 people died. 66 child died. And many civilians, many homes were demolished. And I would like to tell you that the people who lost their houses in the 2014 houses war, they never got their houses built back again. They never let the concrete or the blocks or the material to go back in Gaza. And today the borders are closed. There is a ceasefire. There is a ceasefire. We think life is back in Gaza. It's not. It's not. The borders are closed. The medical aid trailers are standing at Salem's crossing waiting to enter Gaza. They're not allowed in Gaza yet. And we watched the news. We watched Arab Israelis and how they were tortured during the war too. They brought settlers for them. They could not, the people who lived with Arab Israeli were fine. But they brought settlers from the West Bank to attack and beat the Arab Israelis in Jaffa, in Lod, and in many other, wherever Arabs live. In Jaffa, what's happening to the people of Jaffa? 2.5% of the people in Jaffa now in Tel Aviv are Arabs. The house that they live in for years, now they have to pay as rent for the house. And not only that, they said, well, that was for the first generation. Now we are a second generation. We have to sell the house. You have to buy your house again. If you can't afford it, and they're asking for millions of dollars, huge prices for the houses, get out of the house. And those are the Arab Israelis are being kicked out of their houses now as we speak in Sheikh Jarrah, in Jaffa, in Akka, in Lod, in many places. Again, the occupation is not fun. Occupation was never fun. Injustice is not fun. We experience it every day of our life in Gaza. We experience it in our days, in every day of our life in the West Bank. There are big, beautiful, nice roads for the settlers. And where do the Arabs go? Find a road, go over the mountain, find your own road. This is discrimination. This is apartheid. This is unacceptable in the 21st century. Thank you.
Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Allahu Akbar!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
Peace be upon you. I am Palestinian. I lived most of my life there, experienced and witnessed the oppression of occupation. But since time is limited, I won't be able to go into more details about my experience back home. You must all have heard about ceasefire agreement. The term may indicate that everything is just fine now in Gaza Strip and the rest of occupied Palestine. Please don't be misled by the term. According to Amnesty International, We have seen over and again that the ceasefire alone will not obtain justice for victims unless root causes like the illegal blockade of Gaza, impunity, long-standing dispossession and oppression of Palestinians are addressed. It's likely there will be another round of civilian deaths and destruction. Even right after announcing ceasefire, the Israeli military and police attacked worshippers who gathered for the Friday prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Ceasefire is not enough. If there will be no fair and just trial of the perpetrators, then the victimizers will continue to be victimizers and the victims will continue to be victims. Listen to this, please. An Israeli pilot in an interview with Israeli Channel 12 revealed that the destruction of residence towers in Gaza Strip was a way to vent the army's frustration. Did you hear that? It was a way to vent the army's frustration. This cannot be but a war crime and violation of the international law. How many more war crimes need to be committed before the occupiers are held accountable for their actions? Doesn't this refute their claim of self-defense? According to Haaretz Hebrew News, 15 Palestinian families lost at least 3 and in general more of their members during the latest attack. Wiping out entire families in Israel bombing in Gaza was one of the characteristics of the war in 2014 in the roughly 50 days of the war then. UN figures say that 142 families were erased. The numerous incidents then and today attest that these were not mistakes, and the bombing of a house while all its residents are in follow a decision from higher up backed by the approval of the military jurists. This is one more piece of evidence that disputes the colonizer narrative of self-defense. Self-defense against whom? Against these 2 kids who were so happy to save their big fish after Israeli bomb destroyed their house.
75 in May. 75 children dead.
Or against this little girl who is carrying her toy and walking amid this huge destruction. Though Gaza Strip has the biggest share of death and pain, the situation in the rest of Palestine isn't better. Expansion of settlements, more restrictions on Palestinian movements, humiliating them on checkpoints, confiscation of their lands, stealing their houses as what has been going on in Sheikh Jarrah, arresting and killing of civilians, and so many other forms of human rights violation. According to Defense for Children International, Israel is the only government in the world that systematically arrests and tries minors under military law. Currently, Israel prosecutes between 500 and 700 Palestinian children in military courts each year. Last but not least, I would like to say that as a Palestinian, I'm really glad to hear more and more American voices speaking out about the injustice and standing on the side of the oppressed. Your voices really matter. Your voices really matter. You are not anti-Semitic if you stand against war crimes. As Martin Luther said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you.
Free Palestine!
Occupation is a crime!
Hello. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Nurhan. I'm Palestinian, and I'm going to tell you all the story of Amin Hamdi al-Rajabi. He's age 36, a Palestinian from Hebron, Palestine, or Madinat al-Khalil. He was detained and spent 15 years in Israeli detention. Israeli occupation forces arrested him in 2003 at the age of 21. They transported Amin between 3 different prisons until he was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Israeli court. and he spent the remainder of his sentence in Bir Shaba' Central Prison, or Sijn Bir al-Saba' al-Markazi, located in southern Palestine. In this prison, there are massive cases of medical negligence towards any and all Palestinian prisoners. At times, the Israeli prison guards would perform raids on the prisoners in the middle of the night and do random body searches, take them out of the rooms, harass them, and they would sometimes physically abuse the prisoners, throw tear gas at them, and leave them outside in the cold without any kind of covering. A lot of this treatment isn't geared only towards young Palestinian male prisoners, but also elder Palestinian prisoners, children, and Palestinian women. This is an assault on ensuring the prisoners' free trials, an assault on human rights, and arbitrary arrests have been a key feature of the Israeli occupation's attempts to repress the Palestinian people's struggle. Since April, at least 1,800 Palestinians in the West Bank and Jerusalem have been arrested and subjected to abuse and torture by Israeli forces in their prisons. It's important to note that the fight for Palestinian liberation is a fight not only for Palestinians, but for all oppressed peoples across the world, and also a call for the freedom of all political prisoners. Thank you.
Hello guys, my name is Luna. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that today we are standing on stolen indigenous land. As a Palestinian, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, and I'll always stand and fight for you. As a Palestinian, my heart is bleeding for my people. I feel a great sense of sorrow and guilt watching on as my Palestinian brothers and sisters suffer unspeakable pain and grief at hands of Israeli terrorist entity. Shame. As an Arab, I feel betrayed by the so-called leaders of the Middle East who have proven time and time again that their allegiance lies with their puppeteers, the Israeli settler colony. As an American living on stolen land, I feel a great sense of disappointment. I'm appalled by the complicity of our government and our media and the Israelis' continued ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. But above all, as a human being, I'm angry. I'm angry that my paternal grandfather never got to return to his home after leaving in 1967, that he never got to breathe in the sweet air of his lemon and orchard trees. I'm angry that my maternal grandparents were forced to leave their homes in 1967 and have since died with the Free Palestine omen on their tongues, having been deprived the right to return to their homeland. I'm angry that I and you have to stand here today to justify the fact that Israeli occupation is a crime, that Israeli apartheid is a real living force oppressing the Palestinian people, that the massacring of our children, our fathers, our mothers, our sisters is a crime against humanity. For 73 years, the Palestinian people have been living in a constant state of Nakba, and more depressingly, over the past 2 weeks, the people of Gaza have been subjected to some of the most horrific forms of settler colonial aggression. I want to take this moment today to remind you that while a ceasefire has been called, the oppression of the Palestinian people has not ended. Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah still face dispossession at the hands of the Israeli settler colony. Palestinians continue to live as second-class citizens on their own land. The violent siege in Gaza has not ended. Illegal Israeli settlements continue to be built on stolen land. Palestinians continue to face extreme forms of violence by the Israeli occupation forces. There will be no rest until the racist apartheid Zionist raging is dismantled. For the Palestinians, there's been no ceasefire since 1948. We do not have to wait for more Palestinian deaths to continue our campaign against this colonial apartheid regime. Israel's self-defense narrative is unraveling right before our eyes. The world has seen Israel for what it truly is: a vile, racist, oppressive settler colony. Israel lost the war on a public opinion. And now is the time more than ever to continue mobilizing. Continue to boycott Israel companies. Continue to push our government to place sanctions on Israel. Enough is enough. The anti-apartheid boycott movement freed our South African brothers and sisters, and it can free Palestine too. In 1948, Israel began its campaign to try and erase my people. A campaign to try and erase me before I was even born. And yet today, here we are in numbers testifying that Palestine lives in every single one of you. For 73 years, Israel, you've stolen our land, burnt our olives, dispossessed our people, taken over our orchard trees, destroyed our homes, killed our children, but you'll never destroy the Palestinian spirit. My name's Luna Muradway. My mom and dad are from Nablus, Palestine. I was born in Nablus, Palestine, and I testify that my blood is Palestinian. You cannot erase me. The old may die, but the young will never forget. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
Hi everybody, my name is Shachaf. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew, so grew up in Israel and lived there till not that long ago. I first of all want to stand and I want to thank the Palestinians that actually are giving me a space. I don't think it's obvious. I don't think the oppressors and colonizers always deserve a place. But I think we're in a moment where Jewish solidarity and especially Israeli anti-Zionist solidarity are very important. The general public start to change their mind. We see it in the media. While Israel is becoming more and more a violent settler colonial entity and inflicting more and more violence on everyday basis, invading people's houses, evicting people from their houses, and more recently, as we've seen in Gaza, using genocidal attacks to kill hundreds of people. Most of them are kids and families. As an Israeli, that's done in my name. I've been there, I've seen it. But as an Israeli, I also know that what I learned from my family. My grandfather fought the Nazis in a partisan underground in the Second World War. My parents believe that never again means no people in the world should ever be persecuted because of who they are. Not the Palestinians in Gaza, not the Palestinians in Jerusalem, not the Palestinians in the West Bank, not the 48 Palestinian citizens in Haifa, Akka, and many other places, and not forget the Palestinians in refugee camps. We believe in the right of return. We believe in the right of return. We believe that my friends here, Palestinians, should go and visit their land, their families, and have the same rights that every Jew has these days. And until they can go back to the land, there will never be justice, and therefore there will never be peace. I want to read a poem that usually is read in Memorial Days in Israel for victims of violence. It's usually used for Jewish victims, but I think it's much more relevant for Palestinians these days. Every person has a name given to him by his enemies and his love. Every person has a name given to him by his holidays and by his profession. Every person has a name given to him by God and by his mother and father. Every person has a name given to him by the statue and by the manners of smile and by his clothes. Every person has a name given to him by the mountain and the walls of his house. It goes longer, but I'll stop here. I want to also remember to not forget that, as said, this is an indigenous land. This is a city that is segregated and keeping racist policies against Afro-American people and every people of color. And until we fight for liberation of all, there will be no liberation for anybody.
Hi everyone, my name is Barbara Berman. I'm with Jewish Voice for Peace here in Louisville. It's a national organization that advocates for Palestine. I'm going to talk about some personal experiences of growing up Jewish and how it made me much to realize the injustices that Israel has and is committing. I see it as taking my Jewish blinders off and seeing reality. And no, criticizing Israel for its human rights and justices against Palestinians is not anti-Semitic. Israel was just 3 years old when I was born in 1951. My family lived in a new suburb of Montreal, Canada, and my father helped to start a Jewish Hebrew school, which my brother and I had to attend 3 times per week, in addition to regular school. One of the very popular activities was donating money to have a tree planted in Israel. I remember getting a certificate saying that a tree had been planted in my name. I understood that we were making the desert green. However, 45 years later, yes, it took me a long time, I learned that more than 400 Palestinian villages were destroyed when Israel was created, and many of the trees were planted to cover up the rubble from that destruction. And then there were 700,000 Palestinians who were displaced from their homes, what is called the Nakba, or the catastrophe, at the hands of the Jewish militias during the creation of the State of Israel. And they went to the West Bank or to Jordan. So I grew up at a time when there was much excitement about Israel among Jewish people, but I never heard what had happened to the Palestinians to make Israel a Jewish homeland. Birthright Israel provides free first-time peer group trips to Israel for Jewish young adults aged 18 to 32. My uncle took me to Israel in 1982 when I was 31 years old, showed me the entire country except for the extreme southern part, and paid for everything, so I consider it my birthright trip. I wanted to go see the lay of the land, so to speak. Is Israel that vulnerable geographically, like we were taught in school? From the hills of Jordan, can you see across Israel? Does this justify the Israeli military? Well, from the time the plane descended in Israel with the song Hava Nagila, a song composed in the 1920s, when Hebrew was first being revived, I was in love with the country. I stayed at a kibbutz, or a collective farm community, visited the Western Wall in Jerusalem, went close to Lebanon where I heard gunshots, and went up near Syria where I saw abandoned military tanks. There was no check wall then, no checkpoints, no wall separating the West Bank or Gaza. But today, there is a wall, 211 miles of a wall, and I've read that Birthright Israel trips never hear or see anything of that wall. My real education about Israel and Palestine happened 12 years ago, when I had what one would call a heart-to-heart connection with a Palestinian. I asked a patient in the clinic where I worked where he was from. He said Palestine. I thought, well, it's legally called Israel now. So I looked at him and I said, Israel. As soon as I said that and our eyes met, I realized that I didn't know what I was saying and that what I said was wrong. As a Jewish person, we refer to Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. Well, before Israel, there was Palestine, and the West Bank was taken by Israel. And the West Bank was taken by Israel after the 1967 war, but is actually occupied territory. That is, occupied by Israel, the longest occupation in modern history. So although I didn't know exactly where this patient was from, I learned why he said Palestine. I went home and educated myself. If I were him, I would have done the same thing. My view of Israel has never been the same since. My wanting there to be a Jewish homeland does not justify what was done to Palestinians in the past or present. It is an injustice to have your homes and land taken from you. It is inhumane to live in refugee camps or in Gaza, which many describe as an outdoor prison, to not have clean water, to have to go through checkpoints and often be at the whim of the Israeli military. Criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. It is about wanting social justice. Say no to apartheid. Say no to settler colonization. Say no to ethnic cleansing. Say no to U.S. tax dollars funding crimes against humanity. Say yes to the end of the occupation. Say yes to the right of return for Palestinians. Thank you.
Free, free Palestine!
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 Free, free
Malik. My name is John's Domain. I'm a journalist, activist, traveled to Palestine with the International Solidarity Movement. A couple years ago, I went to Palestine for the first time since 2004. I spent 3 months based out of Ramallah in the West Bank, covering the atrocities of living under occupation. From the moment that I decided to go to the area, I was worried about being turned around at the border. Many pro-Palestinian activists and journalists have been turned around by the Israeli government. You have to ask yourself, why would the Middle East only self-proclaimed democracy censor and restrict journalists from entering? When I arrived at the border of Israel and Jordan, I was questioned and held for a second round of questioning. Then I was allowed to enter. Once I was on the ground, I was amazed to see how much Palestine had changed in 15 years. There is no documentary or no amount of reading that can prepare you for what life is under occupation. Seeing it up close in person is the only way to fully grasp the occupation. The simple things that we take for granted are not an option for Palestinians. For example, travel and movement. For those that don't know, the people of Palestine and the West Bank have been occupied. The people of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza have been occupied since 1967. In the early 2000s, the Israelis constructed a separation wall that splits and divides areas of the West Bank from the 48 borders of Israel. In order to go city to city, in many cases, there is one way there and one way back. Trips that used to take 20 to 30 minutes now take an hour or 2 hours. Along these routes, there are checkpoints that Palestinians have to go through. Sometimes these checkpoints are blocked and backed up, and sometimes even closed down. We think it's hard just going to work every day and dealing with rush hour traffic. Imagine having to deal with rush hour and military checkpoints. That's no fun. Not knowing if they will be let in at these checkpoints. Not knowing if they be let in these checkpoints. This wall has literally separated families. Once you get over the shock of maneuvering in the police state, I started covering the nonviolent resistance. Every Friday in different villages and cities in the West Bank, Palestinians protest after Jumba, which is Friday worship. The first demonstration that I attended was in a village called Kafr Kadum. The people have been protesting the seizure of land and the closure of roads by the Israelis for the past 8 years. The land was seized for illegal settlement expansion, and the road closure made a once 15-minute drive to the next big city, Nablus, a 45-minute trip. At the demonstration, I was very cautious because the Israeli occupation forces have been known to use live ammunition and tear gas, rubber bullets, and sound grenades on protesters. Does that sound familiar from all the people who was out here protesting the Breonna Taylor rebellion? Yeah. I made it out of my first protest that I covered safely with just a little tear gas damage. I wouldn't be so lucky a couple weeks later at a village called Al Maguire. While I was covering a protest against settler attacks that plagued the village, I was shot in the leg by an Israeli soldier with a steel-coated rubber bullet. I couldn't believe that they actually shot me. After the shock of getting shot, I clearly had my press pass around my neck and a press vest. But obviously, freedom of press is not a given in an apartheid state. As I soon was reminded again and again, I was part of a march of international journalists that gathered in Ramallah for a conference on freedom of press. Over 100 international journalists attempted to march from Ramallah to Columbia checkpoint. Columbia is the biggest checkpoint in the West Bank. It separates Jerusalem from Ramallah and the rest of the West Bank. As we got to about a half mile from Columbia, we were met with a barrage of tear gas without no warning. You have to ask yourself, why would the only democracy in the Middle East want to suppress the media. Maybe because the numerous international law infractions. For years, the occupied Palestinians have been demonized for resisting the occupation with force, even though the occupied have a right to resist under international law. After the Second Intifada, most have turned to nonviolent resistance, which is constantly met with a heavy-handed response by the oppressors. It's a case of you damned if you do and damned if you don't. Another thing that I was astounded by during my time in the West Bank was the use of collective punishment, specifically home demolitions. To punish families and people suspected of crimes, I couldn't believe that this was a normal tactic used by the Israelis. I witnessed home demolitions or land grabs of the occupied city of East Jerusalem. This is, some of y'all are familiar with this with Sheikh Jarrah. I actually went to another neighborhood in Jerusalem, to the refugee camp of Shurafat. The IOF came in and demolished several shops on the main street in the camp. The belief is that the Israelis are trying to make it so difficult to live in the camp that the people will up and move, and the settlers and the Israelis will take over Jerusalem. The other home demolition that I witnessed and almost lost my life happened in the Al Amari refugee camp, which is a place in Ramallah. The home of the Abu Hamid family was issued a demolition order and had 10 days to leave, you had 10 days to leave, or you can demolish your house yourself. Actually, the family resisted. This was the 4th time that family has had their house demolished. During the second demolition, the pregnant mother was pushed down the steps and she lost her baby. So what I'm saying is, like, we need to stay in support and solidarity with the Palestinians. Don't just come out here just when there's a tragedy happens. We need to be free in Palestine on our minds 24/7, not just when there's a barrage on Gaza or there's a catastrophe going on. And also remember, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You know what I'm saying? Yalla Shabab.
Free, free Palestine! 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 Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
I am State Representative Attica Scott. Can y'all take a minute to love on the organizers? It is not lost on me that we are across the street from Injustice Square Park, and that right now we have many of my people from Injustice Square with you, in the midst of you. Nearly a year ago this time, I found myself and my teenage daughter, I see you, Kalila, and my dear friend Shamika, running from tear gas because LMPD wanted to be violent against us for standing up for Black lives. It matters that more and more Black folks that I'm connected to on social media are changing their profile pictures to stay from Palestine to Colombia, because the message is getting through, and I want you to leave with that hope, knowing that the message is getting through. And I've been very clear with anyone who approaches me, and not very many do, because do not come to a Black woman who has suffered under police violence and ask her why she is standing with Palestine. Why do you think? And it matters to me that although I am not in Congress, there are Black women and other women of color who are holding President Biden accountable to protect Palestinians. And every single person here and every single person you know can take action. Just this week, when my friend Rena posted about making sure that if you have any ties to Venmo, for example, cut your Venmo account, I did it immediately. Listen, I grew up in the projects of Beach and Terrace. My folks who grew up in the projects might not feel like there's a lot that they can do, but we can certainly be part of boycotting. We can certainly be part of divesting. We can certainly be part of sanctioning.
What's up, Facebook friend?
So I want you to know when you leave here today that you are giving people hope. You're giving people inspiration. After last week's rally, somebody posted on Instagram a picture or video of me speaking, and I want you to know my heart was blessed when a Palestinian woman reached out to me and said, I have stories of Palestinian women that I would love to send to you that you could share at any time if you like. That matters and it makes a difference. Please keep sharing, please keep posting, please keep knowing that Louisville, Kentucky can be the heart and center of liberation for Palestine. And in all that we do, let's continue to show up in community and in love and in solidarity with one another. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine!
Gaza, don't you cry.
Gaza, don't you cry!
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die!
Gaza, don't you cry.
Gaza, don't you cry!
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die!
Gaza, don't you cry.
Gaza, don't you cry!
Palestine will never die.
Palestine will never die!
Hey y'all, how we doing? Alright. Hey. My name is Jabril, and I'm a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL for short. We are a party of revolutionary socialists of countless backgrounds, unified in the struggle against global imperialism and capitalism. In that revolutionary struggle against imperialism, we stand in eternal solidarity with the Palestinian people in their fight against the genocidal settler state of Israel and their puppet masters here in the United States and across the Atlantic in the EU. Being against Israel and their fascist policy of Zionism should not be controversial. It isn't to us. It isn't wrong to resist genocide, and it certainly isn't anti-Semitic. Now, I'm not just here as a representative of the PSL. I asked to speak because this is personal for me. My mother was a teacher in Palestine. Though she isn't Palestinian herself, she witnessed firsthand the atrocities that Israel inflicted and continues to inflict on the Palestinian people. My father is from Haiti, a beautiful and revolutionary nation brought to destitution by the racist and imperialist policies of the United States and France. In this intersection of experiences, one thing has become clear to me. This is a global struggle. The settlers who eradicated the native peoples of America and forced the survivors onto reservations, the enslavers who saw the revolution for Haitian independence against French enslavement as a threat, are the same people who are selling billions of dollars worth of precision-guided bombs and missiles to Israeli settlers every year. Biden just sold $735 million worth of weapons just this week to be used to murder thousands of Palestinians. The same French imperialists who blockaded Haiti and demanded almost $30 billion in today's money for loss of property. A debt Haiti would be paying off for 122 years. Are the same people who gave Israel the technology to produce their own fighter jets, which they now use to drop the bombs sold to them by the United States. Let's be clear, Israel is not an independent actor in all of this. The settler colonial project of Israel would never have existed without the support of the imperialist British Empire, and would not exist today if it weren't for the strong support of other settler colonial and imperialist states like the United States South Africa, and the states of Western Europe. You see, settlers and imperialists tend to stick together. They have a strong sense of solidarity with one another. But this is because, deep down, they know that they're the minority worldwide. Whatever desperate violence they throw at us pales in comparison to our strength when we are a unified majority. Palestine has a right to resist against imperialist aggression, and Palestinians have the right to defend themselves against genocide, as do all of the oppressed peoples around the world. Our oppressors are nothing more than paper tigers. Sure, they look terrifying and do terrifying things, but they only do this because they're terrified of us. If we, the workers, the exploited peoples of the world, lock arms and declare that we will take back our rights and our nations by any means necessary, there is nothing our oppressors can do. The people of Palestine, united, will prevail over Israel. It won't be easy. It won't be pretty or utopian. But our victory is inevitable. Israel will launch its attacks. The United States will launch their coups. Both will offer promises of reform with honeyed words. Right? I promise things will be different this time. But these are desperate acts by a desperate class of settlers, oppressors, and owners who are terrified of true democracy. I'll say it again. The people of Palestine, united, will prevail over Israel. All of us, Palestinian and Haitian, Cherokee and Ethiopian, Vietnamese and Russian, will prevail over global imperialism. Join us, the PSL. Join the Students for Justice in Palestine. Join BLM. Join radical organizations fighting for revolutionary justice around the world. Don't just send money or kind words while you can do more. Don't get me wrong, it's nice that y'all are here, but it's not enough to just show up. We need to be organized. The cops here in Louisville, who less than a year ago were beating and gassing us in the streets, are organized. The IDF that trained them is organized. But when we are organized, they will never be able to stop us. The people united will never be divided. Workers of the world, unite! We have nothing to lose but our chains.
The people united will never be divided.
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 Greetings, peace, blessings, and solidarity to you all. My name is Lean, and I'm going to be reading a poem by Rafif Ziada called We Teach Life, Sir. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits filled with enough statistics to counter measured responses. And I perfected my English and learned my UN resolutions, but still he asked me, Miss Ziada, don't you think that everything would be resolved if you would just stop teaching children stop teaching so much hatred to your children? Pause. I look inside of me for strength to be patient, but patience is not at the tip of my tongue as the bombs drop over Gaza. Patience has just escaped me. Pause. Smile. We teach life, sir. Rafif, remember to smile. Pause. We teach life, sir. We Palestinians teach life after they have occupied the last sky. We teach life after they have built their settlements and apartheid walls. After the last skies, we teach life, sir. But today, my body was a TV'd massacre made to fit into sound bites and word limits. And just give us a story, a human story. You see, this is not political. We just want to tell people about you and your people, so just give us a human story. Don't mention that word, apartheid and occupation. This is not political. You have to help me as a journalist to help you tell your story, which is not a political story. Today, my body was a TV massacre. How about you give us the story of a woman in Gaza who needs medication? How about you? Do you have enough broken bone limbs to cover the sun? Hand me over your dead and give me the list of their names in 1,200 word limits. Today, my body was a TV massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits and move those that are desensitized to terrorist blood. But they feel sorry. They feel sorry for the cattle over Gaza. So I give them UN resolutions and statistics, and we condemn them and we deplore and reject. And these are not two equal sides, occupier and occupied. And 100 dead, 200 dead, and 1,000 dead. And between that war crime and massacre, I found how words and smile, and not exotic, not terrorist. And I recount 100 dead, 1,000 dead. Is anyone out there? Will anyone listen? I wish I could wail over their bodies. I wish I could just run barefoot in every refugee camp and hold every child, cover their ears so they wouldn't have to hear the sound of bombing for the rest of their life the way I do. Today, my body was a TV massacre, and let me just tell you, there's nothing your UN